For those that need a title, the title of this sermonette would be Unleavened Bread and Assyrian Kings. You'll see why that would apply here. It would be a little different than you're expecting. Now, in Ezra 6, the days of Ezra and Nehemiah, the Persian king issued a decree to protect the Jews and resume the temple building. You had Cyrus the first and his decree, then you had Darius that had to enter the next decree to enable the Jews to be protected from all the interference and restart the temple building. So the Levites were being purified, the people were separating themselves, and they were seeking God. Now here you had ancient Israel at one time under Solomon with what, 5-6 million people altogether when you do the math? What was left in captivity here was Babylonian, and now under Persia was maybe what, 40,000? I don't remember the exact number. Let's turn to Ezra chapter 6. Turn to Ezra chapter 6, and it's describing how Darius made the decree and how the temple was going to be rebuilt, resumed the building of the temple. They were going to need the offerings. And in fact, Darius was very serious. Do not interfere with the Jews. There'll be timber pulled down from their houses. Pretty serious. And in verse 21, it describes, you don't have to turn there yet, but it talked about how the children of Israel, when they came out of captivity and when they had separated themselves from the filthiness of the heathen of the land, they were seeking the Lord and did eat. Now, what time of year was this? Verse 22, let's look. They kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with joy, for the Lord had made them joyful and had turned the heart of the king of Assyria unto them to strengthen their hands in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel. Think of everything that was already being done. Think of the tiny remnant of what was left of once the great, powerful Israel, now in captivity, a tiny bunch of 10, 20,000, and they were trying to come back to God, and they were actually keeping Passover and unleavened bread. Now, Assyria. What in the world does Assyria have to do with this? This was in the days of the Persian Empire. I looked it up. Assyria, the word is Strong's 904, the word Asher. So that's the legitimate word for Assyria. That is what it says in verse 22, Assyria. The Assyrian Empire had fallen around 609, 612 BC of the approximate dates, the capturing of Nineveh, the last Assyrian general being beaten on the battlefield. It's over. Assyria was in the dustbin of history. Now, Darius's decree was around 520 BC. The second temple was completed around 515, 516, and in this chapter, it was in the 6th year of Darius. Why does Ezra mention Assyria? We're going to look at that. The Jews are returning to God, and in major ways, God was helping them, getting decrees from the emperor of the Persian Empire. Some say, and to try and figure out why the word Assyria is even there, some would say that, Darius being the Persian emperor, he'd be automatically king of Assyria. Well, you could say that. The empire included Babylon, Media, Assyria. There are other historians and commentators that say, the whole area was one system. So it's simply, you have different kings. I don't really personally agree with that one because there's one heck of a difference between the empire under the Assyrians and the empire under the Persians. The Israelites went through that. Now, also, and this was interesting, Ezra, you don't have to turn there. In the previous chapter, Ezra 5:13, Cyrus is called the king of Babylon. King of Babylon? Babylon was gone hundreds of years ago too. What's going on? Why are the kings being mixed up like this? I think God's sending a bigger message here. in an interesting way by mixing up the names of the kings, because there are historians that are still scratching their heads. Why does Ezra say this? I think the message in this is that whoever is ruling, God is sovereign, and when men want to come back to God, God takes care of everything. God steps in and makes everything work. He makes it work with Persian emperors. He can mix and match whatever king, Babylon, Assyria, it doesn't even matter. God takes care of it. I want to bring up another interesting little parallel that you'll find. You don't have to turn there, but we all know the account of King Hezekiah. That's been described, and he was king of Judah between 716 686 BC. King Hezekiah of Judah, him and his people saw the northern kingdom fall. They saw the northern kingdom attacked, beaten on the battlefield, conquered, and hauled off into captivity. The 10 tribes were gone. And here was the Assyrian Empire then licking its chops in the days of King Hezekiah. Now they want to come for Judah. They start attacking it. And lo and behold, just before they hit Jerusalem, their main army is wiped out. Curious little parallel here. Again, Hezekiah, as you can read in 2 Chronicles 30, he was bringing back the holy days, bringing back the law, bringing back Passover. And in fact, it even mentions how the people were doing this with gladness, that very, almost the same word, I think, as you had here earlier in Ezra 6. So the Israel who rejected God up north, the 10 tribes, they're gone. But the southern Judah, who was coming back to God, who was reinstating the holy days after a bunch of bad kings, they were protected. They got God on their side. They got God to do all of this for them. And you can read it yourself in 2 Chronicles 31 and 32, where under King Hezekiah, the feasts were restored, and the priesthood, all of that. You'll find the two interesting parallels there. Those that reject God, what happens to them? And when people want to come back to God, God steps in and makes it all work. And kind of interesting that, curiously, between Hezekiah and Ezra, Assyria is mentioned again. I think God was doing that also as a reminder to the Jews in Israel that, yeah, the Assyrians can be used for punishment, but God is sovereign over the Assyrians too. They don't pull anything on him. Now, what about us today? What does all this mean to us? Well, we have a whole nation today that is not sitting in churches like this. They've got their Easter bunnies a few weeks ago. They got their chocolate eggs. They don't have their unleavened bread. They don't want to know about the Jews' Passover, right? Well, what about all of them in the resurrection? The saints that return with the kingdom of God, we're going to be showing these people how to come back to the real holy days that God has ordained. We're going to be showing them. We're going to remember, yes, as God was with the ancient Israelites in the restoration of the kingdom of God, he's going to be with the second resurrection and the restoration of Jesus Christ and the kingdom, and even the huge second resurrection where everybody has to be retrained. And what a training session that is going to be. The whole idea is, again, I'll just repeat this once, when we return to God, he steps in and makes things work.